Welcome to Your Funeral Coach Talks, a bi-monthly podcast hosted by Lisa Baue, founder of Your Funeral Coach, a consulting and mentoring company serving the funeral, cremation, and cemetery profession. Listen in today to the Leadership Series as she interviews thought leaders and difference makers in her profession.
We're here today with Kim Medici Shelquist. Kim is from Homesteaders Life Company out of Des Moines, Iowa, and she's a woman leader in our profession as well as at Homesteaders. And she has, 13 years, Kim, I believe?
Yeah, I'll be 13 soon.
The magic 13, right? And so you've had a few other career things that have happened in your past life, but I wanted people to meet you and get a chance to get to know you. Right now, you're the Senior Vice President of Planning and Development for Homesteaders. I think you're considering maybe slowing down a little bit in the future, but we're going to get to know you today and learn about your career path and about your leadership path as well. In a male-dominated profession at Homesteaders Life, where I know there's lots of women now, but back in the day, there wasn't as many. And we don't see as many in funeral service back in the day as we do now. So we're going to talk about that too. So thank you for being with us today.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be here.
Well, Kim, tell us a little bit more about yourself. Tell us about Homesteaders too, and your career path. So we'd love to learn more about Homesteaders Life Company and how it serves families out in our community, how it serves funeral homes as well. And I have been a Homesteaders customer over the years and just love that company. Des Moines, Iowa is a little icy and cold in the winters, but it's a pretty cool town. So tell us about Homesteaders and then tell us about Kim.
We're really icy and cold today. We just got our first snow of the year, so that's been kind of fun to see. Homesteaders is a great company, as you said. You were a customer. I don't need to elaborate much more than what you've already said. But I came to Homesteaders because I really coming out of hospice, and I can share a little bit more about that in a minute. I really wanted to see end of life care from a different perspective. And we had obviously, being in Des Moines, together with Homesteaders, I had good exposure to Graham Cook, who was on our hospice board, Judy Ralston Hansen, who was on our foundation board. I knew about Homesteaders, so when a position opened up, I thought, I'm gonna try it. I was ready for a little change, and I couldn't be happier that I made that decision. And part of that is because Homesteaders is so dedicated to the funeral profession. So I really did get to see the inner workings of funeral service, if you will, in my time since I've joined Homesteaders. But better than that, Homesteaders was always interested in helping funeral service understand hospice and the entire end of life community. So even though I changed and I left hospice, over the years I've had great opportunities to talk to funeral directors about hospice, to try to foster those relationships. It's been it's just been an outstanding opportunity.
Well, so you were the Business Development and Communications Director for the Hospice of Central Iowa,
Right.
For 7 years. So you have a strong background in hospice. You were responsible for their education and sales and marketing activities. And this is the state's largest hospice care provider. That's a huge job. So you had 10 people underneath you that were working in hospice services. So funeral homes and hospice have never really mixed well. I think we try. Some funeral homes try to have better relationships with hospice. We're not sure hospice is trying to have better relationships with us. And so this has kind of been a bridge that needs to be, maybe there's a gap that needs to be bridged, I guess I would say. And so this is cool that you changed from being a background in media and communications into business development, and now you're with a different end of life company that helps people pre-plan for funerals, in the future. So tell us, Kim, how did you? I guess we know why you made that decision. It's been a good decision. You've been there for 13 years. As a woman leader, you grew yourself from the Director of Marketing and Communications, where you were there for 5 years, and then you grew into the Senior Vice President. How do you get there from from where you came from. How do you get to that point where you all of a sudden somebody walks in your door and says, "Hey, I want you to be the senior vice president of planning and development." How's that happen?
Well, the old standard is a lot of hard work, right? And
Sure.
that's true. I like to work and you work hard, but it was a combination of things. It was a combination of always having in my history an interest in strategic communications and strategic activities, those activities in the community that had a purpose that helped the company or the organization achieve a larger goal. So strategy was always a big part of my world, even when I was working in, I'm going to say, just communications. Although as a communicator, I don't think there's any such thing as just communications. I think it's everything. So it was a love of strategy, but it also was opportunity, because all of our careers are sort of a mixture of hard work, expertise, and opportunity. And when I came to Homesteaders, I was able to work with a couple of really great people. And Steve Lang, in particular, said, and there were lots of good
Great
people,
guy.
so I hate to call out just one
Sure.
person, but Steve Lang, in particular, saw a need to have a more strategic focus for homesteaders. And he and I worked together to identify what that might look like. And that really was my opportunity to take the strategic part of my skill set and apply it beyond just the communications and outreach, but to operations, to sales, to the whole picture of how do we set a goal for the company, and then how do we put into place all the activities and thoughts that will help us achieve that goal. So lots of opportunity. And I want to cut back to something too, that this is a strategic piece too. You talked about the idea that hospices and funeral homes don't always get along and don't always see each other as beneficial. I was shocked when I came to Homesteaders and realized that, because in the hospice that I worked in with our local funeral homes, we had such good relationships. We had funeral directors that trained our staff on what first call looks like. We had
That's
we
awesome.
had social and educational gatherings. So strategically, as soon as I got to Homesteaders and realized that not everybody did that, I thought, well, there's a huge strategic opportunity here, right? So always
To
in
teach.
my
Yes.
brain, it's always, what's the end goal and how are we going to get there? How are we going to map that out so we can achieve it?
Right. So the end goal is to better serve families who are facing the death of their loved one, who are going
Exactly.
through a horrible, very difficult experience, and many times they've never been through. I went through that with my mom. I've never. I'm a funeral director, and I have never been through an end of life experience with a family member. So when you have that experience, you now all of a sudden you get it. You're like, oh, wow, this is hard, but the hospice people really hold your hand, and they really help you through it. And that's kind of what funeral directors do too. They take you from that. It's like a passing of the hands, right? They take you from one hand to the next hand, and if they work better together, right, they're serving the same customer, the same client that needs them in different ways emotionally at different stages of that end of life. So we really kind of do some of the
Exactly.
same similar caregiving, right? We do the same similar caregiving, but sometimes I think funeral homes will get a little hesitant because they think hospice always wants to know what the price is, and they're going to turn around and recommend people based on price. Well, I think hospice is going to recommend you, I believe this, will recommend you based on the care that you give when they understand the
Yeah.
care. So these funeral homes you dealt with before took the initiative to make sure that you in hospice understood the level of care that they provided. It's really isn't some for some families it is about the price, but for other families maybe not. So I think that's
Right.
interesting, and that's leadership right there, Kim, to recognize
Right.
that you took. So then what did homesteaders do about this? You led this charge with Homesteaders, strategically, as the senior vice president of planning and development, you came up with these ideas to help them set goals to better improve relationships. Is that
Mhm.
kind of what is that kind of a roll up, right? So you got to be an idea person as a leader to
Yeah.
execute, and you have to be organized to set goals, and then you have to get everybody together so you accomplish those goals, right?
Exactly. One of the key things that we did over many years was really looked at. It's so easy to set goals, right? I mean, seriously, most of us can say, this is what our audience looks like. We have a great research team at Homesteaders, so we have a good picture of what our community looks like, if you will. I think we have a pretty good understanding of what consumers need at end of life and what funeral professionals need at end of life to serve those consumers. So now you set the goals, and I hate to say it, it sounds a little flippant, but that's relatively easy. The hard part is saying, okay, how are we going to achieve that goal? And achieving that goal is much more about execution, and to really properly execute, now we've got to understand what are the steps that we have to accomplish to get to the point where we feel like we have achieved that goal. So, really, after the first couple of years, my role then, because I also managed our project management department, our our
Oh,
teams became
interesting.
much more about how we have great ideas for how we get there, but these ideas have to be more than ideas. They have to be concrete, clear initiatives with a series of objectives and tasks that will help us achieve them. And so then the perhaps the hardest part and the most satisfying part of my job was to really say, how do we make sure that all the activities that need to happen in a way that is understandable, comprehensive, correctable if we find that maybe we didn't pick the right activity or we didn't execute on it the way we wanted to execute on it. So it was really
Or
about
you ran
building
into
an
some
infrastructure.
roadblocks.
Exactly.
Right.
Or the
So,
environment
yeah.
changes. There's so many,
Oh, yes, it does.
it's all about clarity but flexibility. There's
Sure.
always a little ambiguity in those projects where you have to be able to flex, right? But you still have to be able to know where you're going. Otherwise, you won't. What's the old
Right.
saying?
So you
If
say
you
goal, yeah.
you don't know where you're going, you just might get there.
That's good. I love it. You don't know where you're going. You just might get there. Right. So do you think as leaders, people are good goal setters or goal achievers? I mean, you said it's easy to set goals. And once a year, you kind of relook at what you did
Yeah.
last year. You look forward, what should you be doing next year? So how do you
Mhm.
get people to execute? How did
Yeah.
you, as a leader, a woman leader in Homesteaders, help people accomplish results? Because that's really the end result of setting goals is you have to accomplish something or reevaluate it
Right.
as to whether it's makes sense to continue to do. So as a leader,
Right.
you want to set goals for yourself and set goals for your team. Now you got to execute them. How do you hold people
Right.
accountable to that? How do you get them to execute on their goals and the company's goals?
Yeah. So remember, the part about my job is that I managed the project managers, but I didn't manage the work
Hmm.
teams. So, and that's pretty much true in most planning areas, right? So what you're doing is you're trying to create a framework for accountability, for accessibility to resources and support that you need, and find resources are everything from staffing to finance, to access to the markets that you need to have access to. So I think the hardest part is really goal setting is easy. It's not without pain. Don't get me wrong, because you have to come together as a leadership team to agree. But those are the easy things. It's really the execution that's hard because of all the things that get in the way. So to me, the key was create a framework that everybody understands and can work within. And then when you have that framework and you have the support of the team, the team has to take a step beyond supporting and to become the point of accountability. Especially when you're talking about a group of high level leaders, it's not a question of, do you have a boss who's going to say either do it or you're gone. It's because you're all working together
Right.
as a team, and somebody else's effort probably depends on what you're doing. So we really, our goal was to create a framework and then to create a team that would support that framework and hold each other accountable at the same time as supporting each other. And so we did as much teamwork during that time frame at Homesteaders as we did structural work.
Oh, that's interesting. So tell
Yeah.
us a little bit more about this teamwork concept. So teams can't always make all the decisions, right? Somebody at the top has to make the
Oh,
final
yeah,
decision. But team think. What about
absolutely.
team think? Did you lots of team thinking together? I think there's great
Yeah.
ideas when you do that. And I think as a woman,
Yeah.
we're idea people, many of us, and I think that's a great thing to do. So that was successful for you.
It was. I think we did a really good job with that. And one of the things that happen in an organization is you look at the key functions of the organization. So in our case, it's the finance part of things, because insurance sales at the root of it is all about investments and proper pricing, right? So, do you price the products correctly, and then do you make the right investments? Or in this environment, or the interest rates are coming up a little bit now, but remember, we make long-term investments. So a lot of our investments are still the old really low interest rates. So you have to focus on that. And then the other side of what we do is very much a sales um, a focus, because we have to put those products in front of people who can actually use them,
Sure.
i.e., the funeral professional.
Right.
So what would happen a lot
Well,
of
and
times is
yeah.
that those two key functions in a group full of leaders, those two key functions could dominate the conversation. And so what we had to learn to do was to work together and listen to everybody, and not always defer to the sales guy or the money guy or the finance guy or the product guy. We had to say, as team leaders
Were there some girls there
sitting
too?
around
Some
the
product
table,
girls?
we
Yeah.
we no,
So
we
you got to keep people
no.
moving.
Yeah, yeah. We have a really great leadership team, and we do have several extremely good women on our team. So insurance is traditionally a male dominated field. And
It is.
when you
Yeah.
look around the office at our office, you'll find several key women in leadership positions.
So when you're sitting there in these meetings and you're doing the idea think tank, sometimes there's people who are dominant. And how do you get the people who are not speaking up to speak up? I mean, I think that's a leadership quality that you have to
Yeah,
stay on top of those quiet people, that
yeah,
really could have a lot to offer.
yeah.
Yeah. So
I
call on
think
them,
because
right? Call
for
on them.
Right, exactly. For many years, initially we used a consultant who was extremely helpful to us in terms of the structural part of the planning. And but he also did help us facilitate that teamwork. We did what a lot of companies do. We did disc profiles, but then we really dug
Oh yes.
into them with each other to actually talk about, oh, I see you're a C and I'm a D, and there's probably a reason why we struggle when we're trying to solve a problem. And we really had those kinds of open conversations about, this is my tendency and how I like to communicate. But I agree, just at the most basic part, as somebody who facilitated a lot of those conversations, I really pulled back and drew on my old focus group moderator training, which is, I always would say to a focus group when we started, um, if I if I don't hear from you, I'll probably call your name. So I really want to encourage you to speak up. If you don't hear me call your name, I'm sending you a message too. And it always gets a little bit of a joke. We always get a little bit of a laugh out of that. But it's really important that the group understands, what am I trying to achieve? I'm trying to hear from everybody. And I
Oh, that's
have
great.
over the
That's a good
years.
leadership quality.
Yeah, I mean, over the years, as a facilitator in a variety of my roles, not just at Homesteaders, I've had to say, "I'm sorry, we've heard from you." And you do it in the best way you can and the kindest way, but sometimes you have to remind people that you're saying the same thing. You've just tried to position it differently.
Oh, interesting. That's interesting. So you have to gently say things like that. Well, let's talk about Kim as a leader. So you got there, you're there, right? And so all leaders make mistakes. You know, no matter what size of company you work in and work for, and your background, we make mistakes and we learn a lot from our mistakes. So tell us a little bit about some Kim mistakes and what you learned from those and how you overcame them.
Yeah. I think about leadership. I think a lot of times people think leadership is some innate quality that people have. You either have it or you don't. And I couldn't disagree with that more, because I think you become a leader through the experiences that you have. You may have some characteristics that make you look more leader like. You're outgoing, you're quick on your feet, that kind of thing. But I think the biggest mistake that I've made as a leader, and I've made it unfortunately way more than once, is to think that it's my job to fix everything. That as the leader,
Hmm.
you have to be responsible for every failure on your team. It's that whole buck stops here idea. And it is true. It's absolutely true. If you had a company and something goes wrong, you own it. But behind the scenes,
Sure.
you have to think about. I used to spend a lot of time thinking about, well, that person failed because I didn't give them the right training, the right tools, the right encouragement. It took me a long time to understand that part of being a leader is also determining whether the people that work with you have what they need to be successful. And that could be an
Hmm.
inherent, you just aren't the right person for this job. The hardest part
Hmm.
of being a leader, I think, is recognizing when that happens and helping somebody either find another way to fit or move on. And, as I think it's a little harder as a woman, because frankly, we are, especially women that are of our era, if you will, we kind of grow up thinking our job is to make sure everybody's happy, and that we're the peacemakers, and that's our role. And it was,
We're the moms.
I yeah, exactly. Thank you. I let a lot of things slide before I realized, look, it's not my job to make you successful. It's my job to make sure you have what you
Yeah.
need to be successful. If you choose not to use those things, my job is to move you out of the way so that somebody else can be successful. And it took me a while
Wow.
to learn that.
Wow. So you took a lot of responsibility for the failure of others on yourself versus figuring out if they had the right tools, the right training, the right education, the right coaching, and then if all else fails, maybe they're in the wrong seat of the bus. Maybe they need to win somewhere
Yeah.
else. So that takes a lot of courage
Yeah.
to do that. And so how did
Well,
you have the
it's,
courage to how did you find the courage to make that happen?
I think I, back to the strategy, I finally had to realize that the greater goal was the thing that mattered. And that was a hard thing for me. The success of the entity was the thing I was working for. That was why I was being paid, right? So, we weren't, um, it wasn't about keeping people on because you were afraid they weren't going to be able to feed their family. Because the other thing that I learned through all of this is the first time that I actually did have to let somebody go, it became not about their performance, but we were just in a really tight time at the company and we had to do layoffs. And I
Oh,
watched
those
that
are hard.
person go on and thrive and find another role that suited her. And I realized, okay, it's not my job to make sure that you can feed your family. And when I realized what my job was to make sure we have the right people in place to achieve the goals of the entity, it just became a lot easier. And, maybe you get harder. I don't know. I don't, if you get maybe tougher about it. I'm not sure what it is, but
Hmm,
realized there were certain things I could do and other things that weren't my responsibility. And I
that's great.
needed I needed to be able to let you take responsibility for the things that are yours. I'm a
I
fixer,
love that.
Lisa. I like to
I
fix
am too.
everything.
I know it's I call it my mom syndrome, but dads like to fix too. So it's not just women, and I think sometimes that's an inherent trait in a leader that you always want to try to fix things, but sometimes you get to a point where you know you can't, and you may be spending a little too much time trying to fix things versus trying to get others to learn to fix their things, right? So I think
Yeah,
there's a lot of training, but there's at some point you got to cut it. You just got to take the scissors out and say it's not working. I've
yeah.
evaluated this. So how long do you usually take, Kim? Do you is it 6 months? Is it 3 months? Is it? I mean, large companies, small companies, you can do more damage by keeping someone around that doesn't necessarily isn't a good fit for the team or is failing
Yeah.
in their role on the strategic plan and the goals that you've set. And because there's continuous failures, everybody else is looking at you going, what does that mean? Right? Because if you keep the failures
Right.
around, then you end up with others not respecting you and thinking, oh, it's okay to fail around here and we can just continue to fail and it won't matter, right? We keep our jobs. So they're not good, right? So
Right.
that was something you turned around and you did it yourself. So I think that's great. So somehow you've got to have that resilience inside of you that can step up and realize you're a smart woman and that this isn't working and we have to try other things. And if those other things don't work, well, maybe it's time to say bye, right? You had an
Yeah.
early mentor.
Yeah.
I'd like you to talk just a little bit about Pat because you said something in our early talks that she was very strong, very compassionate, and a leader with virtually no ego. So she was
Yeah.
humble,
She was
right? Would
so
that
humble
describe her?
and yeah, and still is to
But not
this
a
day,
pushover, not a
as a
pushover.
oh, yeah, because I think people make the mistake of thinking that humble people won't stand up for themselves when they need to, and or that they won't take credit when they need to take credit. I think she was my very first professional boss. Like all of us, I had worked at a convenience store and these kinds of things. But in my very first professional role, and what I saw from her is that she was always focused on the work that needed to be done, not so much on who did it or who was successful. She would give you a chance to try something that you'd never tried before. And if it worked well, you
Ooh,
got credit for it. And if it didn't work very well, she'd tell you, here's what I think you need to do next time. And
nice.
and again, I said, when you and I talked before, I said she understood the difference between leading from behind and leading from the backs of your people. And to me, leading
Uh-huh.
from behind was always that she was always pushing us out there, challenging us to do more, and she wasn't taking the blame if we didn't do it right. She was just going to be very honest with you and say, "Okay, this was your first time. Here are the things that you need to do differently next time." So it was a difference between saying, "I put you out there, it's my fault, you didn't do well," and saying, "I put you
Yeah.
out there, here are the things I would like you to do different the next time you do this." And she never wanted to take credit for the folks that if I did something really great, I got all the credit. And you know what? In doing that, every single person that we worked for as consultants, they knew what was going on. I've always felt like people who think that they have to grab the spotlight for that themselves, or people who spend a lot of time talking about all the great things they've done, that they feel the need for other people to see that. But my own personal belief is what other people see is some need that you have to shine. And I
Right.
you know,
That's more of
it's
a
a
place of
different
insecurity, maybe.
I
Right.
think so, I think
Right.
so.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
Pat was very encouraging, and she also gave you praise for the things that you did well, right?
yeah,
So there was the
yeah,
attaboys and attagirls, and the thank you for doing this, and you did great. So you had the praise plus the redirection. So it's a balance
yeah,
when you're leading people.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing
What
that she
about,
had in I
yeah.
the other thing that she did, and I think this is really important for people who are leading people for the first time, is that she never sugarcoated what she didn't think you were doing well, but she never put it out. It was always so matter of fact, It was always so matter of fact that, "Okay, I saw you do this. I think next time you should try doing this." It was never like, "I'm gonna have to write you up. You did such a terrible job," or like a lot of times as managers, we wanna start the conversation with like 5 things that you did really well, and then we get to the part of the thing that we want you to fix. And she never sugarcoated what was going on. It's like, "Here's what you did wrong. I need you to fix it." And I appreciated that about her. I never had to dig through the niceties to figure out what, and because it was so matter of fact, you're just like, "Oh, yeah, okay, I need to fix that."
She's pretty honest with you and very blunt at the same
Yeah.
time. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. Well, that's good to have that trait. I think you have to balance that too. You're right. We've always been taught to start with the positive, then get to the real issue, and then end with the positive, right? And I learned some different lessons over the years that, you know what, if you have to have a crucial conversation with someone, and things aren't going really well, don't end it with, but I still love you. I still like
Yeah,
you. Really? Okay, so
exactly.
this is about the behavior and the task and the thing that didn't go right. The
Right.
next time you're together, find something that they did well. Praise them at the time they're doing good things. But when it's time to have that talk, you have to be able to have that talk, and you don't sugarcoat it, and you
Yes.
don't make it about anything else but that, or there's no learning,
Yes.
right? But you
I
do it in a
I
kind
couldn't
way.
agree more. You do it in a kind way. And the other thing I think is that as a leader, my responsibility is that every interaction I have with you, I want them mostly to be positive. So, I always have told people that I work with, you won't find out about something you did wrong at your review. The review, when you have your annual review, there will be no surprises because everything that you're doing really well, I'm going to recognize it while you're doing it. And everything that needs to
That's awesome.
be addressed, I'm going to talk to you about it when it happens. And I have a tendency to not be as good at calling out the really good stuff. So that's been, as a leader, I need to be more always focused on saying, "Hey, today when you did this, I really liked it." I tend to have my head down and just moving forward, and so that's been a lesson
Right.
I had to learn.
That's Oh, that's good. That's a good lesson to learn. I know. I just love the book Five Languages of Appreciation. It has chock full of ideas in there where you can learn to be more appreciative. Yeah, I was raised kind of the same way in a German family where you just put your head down and did the work, right? Or you fall off the horse, you get back on, and don't
Yeah.
worry about getting patted on the back, right? So you have to learn to do that yourself. But I
Yep.
think the generations now seem to need more praise and recognition. And I think it's important that we bring that into the workplace more frequently. I think
Right.
that's a good learning, Kim, and it's great that you recognize that. So the crystal ball for the future. What do you think? Where should women leaders go, and what things can they do to better improve themselves and their learning? Um, if you take it from that standpoint, and then let's end with what Kim's going to do next, and what she's learning about life. So, what any tips and ideas, anything you would like to share as we conclude with, for women leaders, some life lessons that maybe they should hear from you today?
Well, I always question myself whether I've got anything to tell anybody that they need to hear, but I think that for somebody of my age, the 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 act of being a woman in a male dominated workforce was so much different 40 years ago, right? Because we kind of knew what the challenges were. I mean, we knew the challenges were making as much money as your male colleagues. We knew the challenges were access to positions of power. We knew when we went into a job interview, we were going to get questions like, well, what are you going to do if one of your kids is sick? And nobody asked that of
Mm.
our male colleagues. Today, if
Mhm.
I'm a woman starting out in a professional role, I mean, in some ways, it's so much better. The situation is so much better. And probably you aren't going to get asked, what are you going to do if one of your kids are sick? Or do you plan on having children and how much time will you take off when they're born? It's again, we don't
Yeah,
ask those questions
shouldn't
now.
be asking those questions.
No, but the harder things are, it's almost like in the evolution that improved our situation, that made positions more accessible to us, that made access to high paying jobs more accessible. We still know that we still know we're challenged by wage disparity. We still know we're challenged by
This is true.
access. And now they're just hidden a little better. And so I think it's harder as a
Mm,
woman starting out in the profession today to know what your battle is, if that makes sense. You don't
oh,
know
that's
where the
interesting.
barriers are because the improvement has made it better. But again, there's still things where you can look and you can say, "Oh, that's interesting. I didn't get invited to that." Or,
Oh,
and why did I not get invited to that? Is it just that I don't fit with that group at work, or is it just that it's all guys? Or, I mean, I think
is
that
it still a good old boys club? Yeah,
yeah, the challenges are
there's a
just
little of that.
little harder to discern. And any business where you're in, where I worked in healthcare where I worked with so many women, and women in high leadership positions, that when I came into the insurance and the funeral space, I was like, oh wow, this really does happen. Now, I've been very lucky in my career that I've not encountered that in a significant way, partly because when I got to a higher level position, I had had these other roles where I didn't encounter it, so I wasn't, like, prepared to, accept it. I was in a high enough
Right.
position
Good for
that
you.
I didn't have to accept it, but now I'm rambling a little bit, I'm sorry. I think it's still challenging
That's
to
okay.
be a woman to go
It's
into
still,
a
yes.
primarily male-dominated field. Yeah.
There are still some challenges, which is why we're talking about it, because I think helping younger women overcome some of these hurdles, and be uh, have the courage to stand up for themselves, have the courage to lead, have the courage to do what you did in these meetings that you led, to show your leadership ability is extremely important. That we encourage younger women and women in our profession, which is still, there may be more coming out of mortuary school, but they're not in leadership positions on a nationwide basis in just about
Right.
anything we see. Not in the corporates, not in the privates. I've run into some funeral homes where we have a lot of women leaders, and ours was one of them. Just naturally gravitating towards the right leaders, not necessarily male or female, but they were just there. And a
Yeah.
woman CFO and a woman CEO and a woman head of our care center, who just stepped up, and she started showing the
Yeah.
leadership ability and the ideas, the creativity, the ability to lead people, to manage the chaos and still accomplish results. It was just there, and we were so fortunate that we found these women. I think we have to give women a chance. I think we have to support them. And sometimes we can be our own worst enemies. When there's a lot of women in an organization, there can be a lot of other problems that go along with that, right? So we have to continue to support our gender and those that choose to be a woman leader, and be sure that they are recognized and praised and taught and trained and held accountable, right, by the things that you've done your entire career, which is wonderful. Well, Kim, we're gonna stop now on this great note, because I think one of the things you've done well is continuing to mentor young women and women in homesteaders, and thank you so much for doing that. I know your next phase of your life is going to be wonderful. Your background with hospice is just incredible, and I would love to have you back on and talk more about how hospice and funeral service can work better together, because I think that's something that's so much needed for the future of our profession. We have to bridge that gap that somehow is there. Not everywhere, but in many funeral homes don't know what to do. They really don't know how to approach hospice, how to create those relationships. And hospice is just searching and seeking for more education about what we do. So thank you for leading that, because I know you
agree.
will. And I know there'll be more
I'll
of
be
that
happy
coming
to
from
do that.
homesteaders as well as Kim. Yeah, I know there's
I'll
more
be
coming,
happy
and you
to
can't
help
talk
with
about
that.
it yet, but new stuff, right? Good. Thank you so much for being on with us today. If folks want to get a hold of you and talk with you more, what's the best way to reach you, Kim?
Yeah, they can use my email, which is just Shelquist, KSHELQUIST at homesteaderslife.com. Or frankly, I don't mind if people give me a call on my cell phone, 515-669-9499. That's my work number, and people can call me anytime if they have a question.
Great. Thank you again for being with us today on your Funeral Coach Talks, and we appreciate you and all the leadership that you have brought to homesteaders over the years, and thank homesteaders for their time in allowing you to be with us.
Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate it. It's been fun.
We hope you enjoyed today's Your Funeral Coach podcast, and will join Lisa Baue and her guests again soon. Let us know if there are any topics you would like to hear more about. For more information on future shows, please go to yourfuneralcoach.com. If you enjoyed the show, consider giving us a 5-star review. Thank you.